right, snake. All right. All right. Well, they like to invoke geology until the geologists.
What's up? Can you
How
hear
you
me?
doing, Brother Snake? Yes, I hear you. I hear you just fine, sir. Sorry, I have to rotate the camera around and change a couple things so
Yeah,
that so everybody's on here. We got 2 viewers already, man. Aren't you excited?
man, that's more than I've had live, at least on my channel.
Would it be okay if I promote this through through Facebook and through some Gmail contacts? Would that be okay with you? Do you want to not go public? Whatever you like is fine for me.
Yeah, do whatever you want with it.
I appreciate that, man.
Other than like false copyright strike it.
Yeah, I watched your video on that, and I thought, what you shown, I thought conclusive and cannot be faked. So I thought
Yeah,
certainly, you're correct.
especially if he has that original file. He says he downloaded it. He should
Hmm.
be able to prove pretty easily. Like,
Right.
I was trying to show screenshots and stuff, and I was like, and I realized like I could fake that. Um,
Yeah, of course you could.
unless he has the other copy. But then I found the audio discrepancies, and I was like, this is pretty conclusive.
Well, I'm more inclined to believe you just because Nephilim is trying to manipulate things on a regular basis. You know,
Yeah,
uh, I've caught him in things that were dishonest in the past, and today I finally accomplished that he blocked me on Gmail, or he blocked me on his email. So I'm pretty happy about that.
I'm probably blocked. I don't know how to check that.
Well, he just announced it to me. I don't know how to check it either, actually.
Oh yeah.
So I've been watching some of your videos and admiring your ability to explain yourself. And I'm not just saying that because you are are appearing here, but the truth of the matter is when I get a feeling about people when they're being honest, and I get a feeling about people when they're being dishonest, and I don't even need to hear much. And I've well confirmed that you're actually being an honest person, and um, I think you're and stop me if I say something incorrect. I think you're presenting yourself as undecided on some pretty large topics, including the existence of God, and of course that's what I'm all about.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean in a general sense, I guess I'm kind of undecided in a category sense. Like I don't think you can really prove a negative in most cases, kind of thing. And I'm always open to have my mind changed.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, I would describe myself as an atheist, but just kind of by default. Um, but I also try, like with evolution, I try and just keep it isolated to a certain topic. So I I tend to grant God in at least when I'm arguing against creationists about evolution, because it's like I can throw them that bone and it doesn't actually affect the argument at all. And
It just eliminates a lot of it that you don't want to bother with.
yeah, exactly. And
Yeah, I understand that.
yeah, um, I've
So
I've been
go
working
ahead.
on a Archaeopteryx video for a while. It's a lot more editing than I hoped it would be, but it's been fun.
Well, I'm no one's paleontologist and I'm no one's historian. Um, I just in 2000 and early in the year 2012, I was shown a contextual view that is falsifiable. And when I tried to, and I wanted it to be false, to be honest with you, I didn't want to change my mind about anything. Who does want to? But when I found it was verifiable and falsifiable and then verified. And I still work today trying to prove it wrong. And I actually am doing this in an effort to invite others to try to prove this view wrong. But so far have not. I haven't found anyone who can.
Okay. Um, thought I had my Bible right here. I think I know where it's gone off to. Um, what do you call your method?
I don't really have a name. I can describe it briefly. People ask me questions, but I don't think I'm educated enough in these things, being only 7 years old, to even answer questions properly. And I apologize to the general. And speaking of apologies, man, I would apologize to you for every Christian who's poorly presented Christianity and an explanation of their view to you, um, and been incoherent and insulting. And I'm really sorry for that. I mean, I truly am. I wish people would stop doing that. I mean, it makes explaining these things just so much harder.
Yeah, and I like to separate kind of the big ideas of like theology from like the quirks and the extremists who
Hmm.
try to drive that. And even just like I enjoy studying religions in a historical context a lot too. Like
What have you studied?
well, I've always been into mythology, so I've been studying like all the gods and like yeah, started off with Greek mythology and Norse mythology, stuff like that. And then I went to
My,
Catholic school, so I got pretty heavy like, biblical mythology.
I would actually call that a disadvantage.
Yeah.
There's plenty of reasons why. Okay, we're living in a dominantly Christian society in the United States. Okay,
Hmm.
and that's not great for learning the text as I now have accepted it that it means, because they're heavy in these doctrinal views. That's why I've named this channel just Demolish Doctrine, because that's exactly what I intend to show, is that even their own spiritual text, it doesn't just argue with one sect of Christianity, it actually argues with every sect of Christianity. And what they promote as what the Bible says has everything to do with the context they're looking at it with, and almost nothing to do with the Bible itself.
Do you mean the Catholics?
I mean, all of them.
Oh, okay.
I could give you a quick for instance. Um, if okay, so I'll just boldly say that prayer compelled me to look some stuff up, and I really didn't care, and I wouldn't have looked these things up. But once I cracked open the Bible, I started to see things that it seems that very few or no people that I've heard of have ever seen this. And that's not a proud statement. That's just the truth of it. This stuff's shocking to me still. Um, if I look up the Ten Commandments, I'm going to find "Thou shalt not murder." Okay, but then Christians will justify the acts of Cain and God protecting Cain, Cain being a murderer of his brother Abel, saying, "Well, he didn't have the Ten Commandments." Well, that sounds pretty cheesy to me. I don't think that's a very good excuse if the Bible was correct that these laws are written on our hearts. Okay, so which is it? Well, it certainly can't be both. So there's a problem there. But I looked up the definitions of the words Cain and Abel. Now it turns out that the name Cain is not just a name like George or Fred. If you look at the overall definition and you summated it and you wanted to make it a one-word definition, that one word would be transition. And then the name Abel, if you summate that as well, you end up with worldliness or materialism. Okay? So actually, the story is about transition killing worldliness. Now, that sounds like a spiritual story. And if that's true, if that's what the story's actually about, then it's talking about the personal individual struggle and what all of us have to go through to become a greater being than what we are at birth. So if I become transition and I kill my worldliness and I come to realize that I'm a spiritual being, not just a physical being, well, at least in accordance with religiosity, that's the goal. Okay, so is it really about this? A really long time ago, first generation born of this earth human murdering each other. Well, that doesn't explain why God protected him, why God prospered him, and why three of his brothers, who certainly must be idiots in the Christian view, why three of his brothers followed him after he just killed their eldest brother, their next eldest brother.
So would killing Abel, that would be symbolically like a good thing?
Sure,
Spiritually?
absolutely. Yeah, within the idea of the text, if the idea is to realize your own spirituality and become a greater being and learn love and forgiveness, specifically love of God and then love of man to follow that, and of course following that love of self. If that's the point within the context of the entirety of the Bible, it's spelled out right there in the very first story past Eden.
I mean, I prefer reading the text more like that. I'm just having trouble understanding, like, I mean, the way it's written, it doesn't seem like you would want to be like Cain, even from like a perspective of that it's trying to tell like a lesson of the struggle of the human heart or something.
Well, later on, it's referred to, and it's referred to the way that people understand it. Much further in the text, is referring to Cain as being evil, but it's talking to a people, and it's during a quote from testimony. So that would be addressing it the way that people understand it. That doesn't necessarily mean it's the way it's intended to be understood. So I agree with you to some extent, but there's no causation, there's no reason why a woman would name her children transition and worldliness if this view of it is wrong. I mean, those are some strange names, don't you think?
Mm-hmm. And I definitely take the perspective that that's definitely a storytelling technique of ancient peoples. So would Abel? You're trying to get rid of what Abel represents?
Well, yes, as he represents worldliness. That's why he raises sheep and he's a sacrifice of flesh. It's always talking about sacrificing the fleshliness, the flesh, the worldliness, the material. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's throughout the entirety of the work, and Abel's no exception.
So what would be the curse that God gives Cain?
Well, he's marked forever. What curse? And what does the word curse mean?
I mean, that's just how I understood it. So like what would that mean for like an individual that we have the mark of Cain, or that we wanted the mark of Cain?
Okay. Well, first of all, the mark of Cain being something that's passed down generationally is a Christian doctrine. It absolutely makes no reference to that in the text. Okay, that's the first thing about that. The second thing is the word curse, and the way that Christians are using it today and in our modern lexicon. Curse definitely has negative connotation, but let's look further in the work for other references of the word curse. You will find there's two men who have a property that joins, and they're fighting forever. Then one day they both find out they both believe in the same God, and they curse each other to meet once a year and worship God together. So let's go back to the way it's used there and look at the actual definition of the word curse. A curse is just a spoken contract or promise. That's all the word curse means. Mm-hmm. So I could say that the 144,000 are cursed, and I would be accurate. That's within context.
Which are the 144,000? Is that
the first fruits? The first one's selected for ascension into heaven. First one's selected. Yeah, that's a. I could say they're cursed and they're marked in their forehead as well. I could say that.
Is that like Jehovah's Witness kind of thing?
Well, it's in the text. People believe different things about it. Jehovah's Witness, they do use a version of the Bible. Yeah.
Yeah, that was my first thought. Um, so what would be so you would get the mark of Cain for throwing off your worldliness.
Yes. I mean,
Um,
let's say you knew somebody that was like an avid atheist, right?
mhm.
And they it was a big part of their life, and everyone who was friends with this person knew it, and then that person became a Christian. Okay, but their family, their friends, their work group, everybody that they knew and associated with were atheistic. Do you think that person would become a vagabond?
If they became a Christian,
Sure.
probably not.
Why would everyone still keep them in the same association if they had that vast of a change?
Well, if I mean, I have Christian friends, and I'm an atheist, so I mean, I wouldn't expect it to be different
Well,
if the roles were switched.
I'm not imagining that you. In fact, one of the reasons I'm talking to you is because you're more open minded and more honest than most of us are,
Well, thank
and
you.
certainly more honest than I was for some 30 years of my life.
I'll
I
take
wasn't
it.
very honest about these things at all.
I try.
Well, it's obvious that you're trying to be honest. I appreciate that.
I mean,
So,
to me,
I,
that's the most interesting part because if you're not trying to be honest, I don't know why you would even bother to think about things because you could just go in your own little fantasy land and just stay there.
yes, of course, and people do. But
Yeah.
I think it's accurate to say that within the story of Cain and Abel, that it's accurate enough, generally speaking, the entire population of the earth, that if someone has a huge alignment change, they're not going to be able to keep the life they had. They're not going to be able to keep the friends they had. They're probably going to have fights with their family if their family is of the opposite view. I mean, I've heard. I don't want to mention any names and say anything derogatory. I think the man is brave, and I think that man is honest, and I really enjoy talking to him too. That a raging atheist or Nakasuchi speaks about how there's problems with his family because he lost his religiosity, and they did not. But I think that's true in reverse as well. Not in every case, of course. There's individuals like yourself, individuals like myself. I've kept pretty good relationships with my family, despite the fact that a percentage of them are very religious and a percentage of them are not. I've seemed to stay okay with them either way. But I think that's unusual. I think that's not the norm. So I think as long as you're talking about the story speaking generally to the populace, I think it applies. I mean, would you even agree with that at any level?
I mean, obviously, there's going to be some of that, but I think at least like American culture, probably European too, is pretty open to differences in religious opinions for the most part. I mean, the reason a lot of atheists get into it is because there is that toxic element in a lot of religiosity. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but it can
What do
come
you
from
think are the
anywhere.
most toxic things?
What's that?
What do you think is one of the most toxic things?
About religion?
Yeah.
I think just the willingness to take things on faith, and then just the dogma that stems from that. I
Do you think
guess.
that
I mean, partially it's just that people aren't using critical thinking skills in their lives, and part of it is the the ability for ill intent actors to take advantage of that and get people to do things that they want.
do you think that's more the practitioner or do you think that's the practice? Do you think that's recommended in the text or something that people naturally do?
I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, people want to be led. A lot of them just want to be told what to do. Um, And then there's people who want to take advantage of that.
Sure. Always has been, always will be.
Yeah. And I don't know. I try to be less angry, but I still get angry sometimes.
Angry about that?
Well, like just yeah, I guess angry about stuff I complain about. It happens.
I, I think it can be a beautiful experience to be truly frustrated about something and help someone else deal with it after you've experienced it.
Hmm.
I think that can be a great thing.
Yeah, it
Uh,
definitely creates a lot of solidarity.
Certainly.
Let's see.
So, like to say hello to everybody that's joined us so far. Marty Camejo, who is just a wonderful human being. This one guy who's helping me with Suffer Revelation, a series we're doing, picking apart the book of Revelation. Math Magic Pagan or Math Pig was here earlier. I hope he comes back. And thank you so much for having this conversation. It means more to me than I could probably ever actually express. And perhaps someday you'll understand what I mean by that. But I thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I love the
So
topic.
here's the problem that I have with religious practitioners versus the religious practice. And I know that I've spoken briefly to you about this before, and I've actually spoken to Marty about it too. I think the question becomes, how open is your mind? Are you able, if a context was suggested to you that justifies all the conflicts and agrees with reality, it being falsifiable, and then it stood to falsification and held true, could you look at it and read the text in that way? Now, I think that's a huge question and a super difficult thing to do. It requires not only intelligence enough to understand an explanation that is difficult, that you've never heard before, but it also requires a complete lack of bias within the individual, which makes me think very few people will be able to do it. Now, I feel like I was forced into it, and I was at least honest enough to accept it, even though I didn't want to. But do you really think that you're capable of dropping what you have been told Christianity is by Christians?
Sure. I mean, I've kind of done that already a little bit. Like, I think you're familiar with Jordan Peterson, um, and the way that he talks about the Bible is really interesting to me because it's more like an analysis of mythology. And I mean, I actually like going through these revolutionary thinking changes. Like I used to be like a big communist, socialist kind of person, and I'm like swung completely to the other end to like almost like anarcho-capitalism type of thing, libertarianism. Yeah, and that was fun.
I don't think I have very good working definitions of most of what you just said, but I think I get the idea anyway.
Yeah, went from a dirty commie to a capitalist.
So, do you think it'd be okay if we just jumped right into a topic?
Yeah, sure. Should I get my Bible real quick?
You can, yeah, whatever you want. Yeah,
Okay, I'll be right
anytime.
back. Okay. All right, dive right in, man.
Okay, so I'm actually not going to use the Bible very much at the beginning of this conversation. I've had this conversation probably hundreds of times with different individuals because I found myself compelled to go and testify to just anyone who seemed like they were willing and able. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
So I've done that for a couple of years now. The YouTube thing is new to me, but presenting this, although I'm not claiming perfection, is not very new to me. Okay, so would you have an off the cuff definition for yourself and your truth theory?
Just what I think truth means.
Yes, sir.
I don't want to plagiarize anyone or anything, but it's pretty much just whatever comports with reality, I guess. I think that's like what Matt Dillahunty says. But I guess kind of the way I think about it is kind of just like whatever set of rules that we both have to play by, basically. Like if there's a chair, if it's real, it's gonna affect us both. We'll both trip over it. If it's fake, then it's just in your mind. And even if we're in some kind of matrix, some kind of computer simulation, that's still part of our reality. I mean, if that's the case, our reality is inside of a computer. We may not know the ultimate everything about reality, but that's part of our reality. So, and if it's shared between us, then we're both part of the same reality, and whatever comports with that is the truth, I guess.
Right. I see you on a computer. You see me on the computer. We are checking each other's sanity and our perception of reality by having a conversation. There's lots of things we have to assume right off the bat, such as solipsism either isn't true or doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that's basically correspondence theory. And I think correspondence theory is valid for most people for most of the time. Okay, so let's just go with that. You subscribe to correspondence theory. I do too, incidentally. All right. Do you have an off the cuff definition of what information is versus what data is?
Definitely, probably couldn't distinguish information from data.
Well, let me ask you
I
more
guess
specific questions.
I wouldn't have an
You'll
off the cuff
probably be able to.
for
What's that?
I don't think I have off cuff for information either.
Okay. So there's Shannon information, which only deals with measuring, making a metric for complexity within data. And while it's true that things like language and information within a language can be measured with Shannon information metric, the opposite is not true. You can't consider just complexity being information. You see the difference there? I'll give you a for instance.
Like the components versus their arrangement kind of thing?
Yes.
Okay.
If you have a lot of variation in components, you could have complexity by metric of Shannon information. However, it doesn't necessarily convey anything.
Okay.
Okay. I could randomly select letters from the alphabet and arrange them not in words, and they could be highly complex. There could even be patterns in it, and it could be very complex in Shannon information, but you and I, neither one could read it because it's not in English.
Okay.
Okay, so I don't want to get confused between Shannon information and actual information. Okay, so then information will transfer ideas from one to another. Okay, and for instance, when we read DNA, we are, and I'm not trying to get into an argument about biology. I'm not a biologist, but when we read DNA, we can see a set, and we can read the set, and because we can read it, to us, it's information. Okay, if something couldn't read that same set, it would be no information. Like me trying to read Chinese, it's not going to work out. Okay, so there's would you agree there's certain, in order to have a transfer of actual information, there's certain things we have to agree on. For instance, you and I are both speaking English. We have to have a common code, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we have to both use that code, and we have to both create and take in information from the other and process it. And that's a conversation. We're trying to understand each other. It's pretty magical, actually, that you can just use airwaves, and I can receive airwaves, and I can understand more about your mind because of airwaves that I heard. It's pretty amazing, if you ask me.
Yeah,
Okay, so would you agree that information is something that is shared between two intelligence?
I mean, I guess the non-Shannon information.
Right.
That's how we understand information. It's like there's the information inherent, like the number of rocks or something, but there's no. We wouldn't really call that information because information is a kind of a thing that is useful only to us intelligences, I guess.
Yeah, I have to agree with that.
Okay.
Okay, so every time that we create something, say we're using the scientific method, right? And they don't write this as one of the things that happen in the scientific method, but once you say it, it's obviously true. The scientific method actually starts out with an intuition, that we have an idea about something, and that's what spurns the rest of the process. Why they don't write that as a step of the process, I have no idea. I guess technically it's kind of not part of the process, but it's certainly a requirement for the rest of it to go through. So when we're testing something scientifically, we start with an intuition, and then we formulate hypotheses based on the intuition. Then we find the best hypothesis, and then we self-correct, and then we peer review, and maybe someday it becomes a theory. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So is it possible for us to have an intuition about something we have no knowledge of, no information on?
I mean, my mind immediately goes to if like caveman out in the woods hears rustling in the bushes and he doesn't know if it's a panther or not. He could be right, he could be wrong, I guess.
Okay,
Is
so
that kind of what you mean?
you're suggesting that he survives by acting in fear. Why is he afraid?
Well, you mean like a biological why, or could just kind of psychologically, like he doesn't want to lose his life?
All of the above.
Yeah. Um, I mean, biologically, it would be true because those who were not afraid just got eaten.
Yeah, they become lunch.
Yep. Especially the kids.
Okay, so both biologically, intrinsically in our makeup, and also what we have learned can give us ideas about reality. You'd agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So if what we're experiencing is both biology and our mind, if you'll forgive me the use of that term, having intuition about things, both of those are prior experience, yes?
Uh, in a sense, I mean, it could be prior experience of the species.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but could there be a first experience and understanding? An absolute first experience with understanding. Are we capable of that?
What do you mean? Like, do you have an example?
Sure. See if I can get centered on the camera. There. Go ahead and tell me. Go ahead and tell me what language that is and what it reads.
Looks like English House of the Ancient.
No, not on the banner above that.
Like the white stripe.
Yeah, the white. Can you see
Oh
the?
no, I can't.
You can't see the print on it.
I can see a little bit. Looks like Cyrillic or something.
It's Russian.
Russian, yeah.
Yeah, would you go ahead and read that?
I don't speak Russian, although
Yeah, I don't
I
either. I had to
studied
look it up.
Cyrillic for a little bit.
Okay, so yeah. So my point is, the first time you experience something, you don't understand it.
Hmm.
The first time it's been experienced, it's not understood. We can have some ideas about it, like you can say, "Oh, that's a language. It looks like Cyrillic," okay, because you've seen other languages. But that's again, you had experiences of other languages. That's why you said that.
Hmm.
So let's say that you had no experience at all. It's really hard to make an example of this.
What about a baby?
I think a baby is a pretty decent example. Do you think babies that are surprised on a regular basis, or do they just understand everything? I mean, that's a stupid question. I put it poorly, and I apologize. Um, I think anytime anyone experiences something for the first time, and they have no familiarity, no metric at all, no basis whatsoever, they're not going to have understanding right off the bat. It just doesn't work that way. In fact, I don't know. Let me start on a new tangent and try to say this in a different way.
Sure.
If we have an understanding of a singular object, um, identifying one thing. Okay, now I'm stuck on a word. Identifying one thing is interpretation. That's the right word. And then if we see two things that are related, we can estimate the relationship, and that's interpolation. And then if we see those two things and we have necessary things outside of them, then that's extrapolation. And we even have intuition, where other things, that other like experiences, tell us something about a new experience. But if we have absolutely zero to base our understanding of an experience on, then we have none of those four. We can't have interpretation, interpolation, extrapolation, or intuition if something is absolutely novel. Does that make sense? Does that work any better?
Um, I, I guess I'm hung up kind of on intuition because that can kind of go anywhere.
It seems that intuition can do a lot,
Mm.
but I think that it definitely has some limitation. You have to have some point of reference somewhere.
Um, I don't know, because intuition would seem almost kind of like a mutation. Like it could be just completely random, and most people probably have the wrong intuition. I mean, everyone has the wrong intuition about something.
Sure.
So it's kind of more just if you have the right intuition, it's almost by luck, just kind of by the numbers type of thing. But
Okay, so if we have intuition sometimes by luck, what kind of accuracy rating should we see in that?
I'm not sure.
Just off the cuff, whatever you think.
Well, I
I mean,
mean,
shouldn't it, if it's luck out of infinite, shouldn't the math reflect that?
I don't know. I mean, like some people have a good intuition for time. I am not one of those people. Um, so I don't know if they had. I don't think it's some cosmic understanding of time that they truly have. It's just that the way that they're wired just comports with reality a little bit better. And
Since you
so,
made an admission, I will too. I have no sense of direction.
yeah,
Just
yeah, and I think it does that does seem more random than those other ones. So, and I'm not aware of any scientific studies or anything over like how much, like the rate of people intuiting things.
Mhm. I'm just trying to say that I imagine that accuracy in intuition statistically should be very low.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if it's actually a novel experience.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So
Like
bearing all
like
that
if
in
there's
mind,
someone, if there was someone who had an intuition that was just uncannily accurate every time, all the time, yeah, that would be that would raise some flags. I think
I
that's where
think,
you're going, right?
yeah, well, basically, yeah, that's where I'm going with that.
Okay.
And the reason that I said those things and in that order is because I've had experience of that. That
Mm-hmm.
is, I had understanding with no experience,
Okay.
and I had no way to understand it, and I had no way to for someone on this planet to tell it to me. That wasn't even possible. Um, because not only did I not have it, no one else did either.
Okay.
So I mean, I think that I could not have intuited certain things that I've looked for and are true. Now,
Um.
I'm not saying there's thousands of those, but there's been a couple.
Mhm. So what kind of things did you into it?
Well, I didn't, which is kind of my point. I didn't intuit anything. It's just that I was presented a view of religion, and by religion I mean all of them, not just the Bible, not just Hinduism, not just Zuni Indian, but a view of all of them that works together. And one of the things that it revealed was a certain part of the Christian text. Now, I refer to it because we're in America and people know it better than anything else. Um, so I came to understand through a non-intuitive process. That is, I couldn't have intuited it. I didn't have any understanding or knowledge of it. I didn't have any prior experience. That there's a context that makes sense within these spiritual expressions, and I've adopted it since. And it makes certain predictions. And one of those predictions, although I looked for it for 4.5 years before we found it, did come to be. I mean, it was in existence before that. We just couldn't see it; it was too far away, and nobody had looked with the right telescope in the right direction. But understanding that the story of Dagon centered around the theft of the Ark of the Covenant was actually talking about the constellation Dagon, not a statue of a god in an ancient land. Well, it sort of is a statue of a god in an ancient land anyway, if it's a constellation. But anyway, um, that it was actually talking about something blocking out the view of those three particular stars, the head and hands of Dagon. And I looked for that, and I told a lot of people that I don't know how many, more than 10, less than 50 people that I was looking for something to do that. And if I had just purchased a telescope, and actually a fairly expensive telescope, I might have been the discoverer of that comet, because I could have found it easily before NASA. I could have found it 4 years before they found it. But I didn't buy an expensive telescope, and I didn't point it where I was looking every night trying to see it for myself in the right seasons. But I understood that the text was actually describing that. Now, some people have said to me, well, that could be coincidence. But I don't think it could be coincidence when it was written in the story. I didn't have any preconceived notions of it. That I looked for it years before it was found. That it is perfectly between those three stars. That it will pierce our solar system and it will block the view of it. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind. There's no doubt if you look at the text that way that comet will definitely do that.
So are there any other comets that you could possibly predict?
Well, actually, there's another one in another story. We haven't found it yet. We haven't seen it yet. There should be a 6-part comet that's going to come into our solar system and probably break up as it circles the sun, probably circling around the sun in some way, probably to the south. But it should be a 6-part comet that breaks up within our solar system. We haven't seen it yet.
Okay.
That comes from the story of David and Goliath. That sounded really weird and stupid, but it's true.
Are you gonna get a telescope so we can see the next one?
I'm not a wealthy man.
Yeah.
I don't think I could actually afford a telescope that could probably beat. But I'm sure there's a lot of novice astronomers who have some really nice equipment who could look for a comet to be breaking up as it enters into our solar system, and probably, possibly even without any electronic assistance, just glass.
Yeah, I mean, I'd put it out there. Someone probably has something to help you out with.
Well, I guess I just did.
And yeah, and if they get the tip off from you, then you'll be part of it.
Maybe I'll get a little hat nod or something, a little.
Yeah, I mean the way I see it though is like someone's somewhere on the earth is gonna find something while interpreting a text.
Oh, sure, lots of things have been found. The question isn't whether or not I can look at the text and see something that hasn't been seen before. The question is it falsifiable in reality? That is does it adhere to correspondence? That's the question. And does it consistently do that, and does it do it without fail?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what's interesting about mythology is that you can kind of interpret it in a way that comports with reality, despite it being about monsters and magic and things like that.
That's the problem that I have. I don't think that's an accurate interpretation of what the stories are about. I don't think the stories are about those things at all. I don't think there's any magic described performed by Christ or Buddha or anybody. I think that a practitioner.
I think that's kind of what I mean is, it is the words say, Thor threw his hammer, or if it was a movie, it would show that, but it's really saying something else with the story.
Oh, certainly.
It's like,
for instance, I could say that in the Epic of Ramayana, Sita is trapped in a beautiful garden, but the garden is ruled by an evil king, and Ram has to cross an uncrossable ocean, a great expansive ocean that no one can cross. And he has to cross that to come and save his wife. Or I could say that people on this earth are the bride of Christ, and Christ will save them, but he's going to have to come here to do it. But Satan's in charge of the planet right now. I mean, I could say that any number of ways.
Mm-hmm. That's what I really like. Some of the Hindu mythology, like the Brahma and stuff, because I see, the tales of, it's like they're in heaven and the kings rule in heaven, and I've forgotten some of the finer details, but they have ants building like these huge palaces and things, and it all emanates from the dream of a sleeping god, which is in the lotus that's growing out of another god's belly button. And to me, it's always been obvious that that was a way of trying to describe, I don't know, like the dimensionality of the universe and how it kind of folds in on itself, and it is everything all at once, but also there's a point in time that's moving through it. I don't know. It's always just spoken to me on a level deeper than just there's a guy on a flower on a guy's belly button. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit deeper than that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that if you spoke to a zealot within that religion, they would probably swear up and down that Buddha was a real person, that Ram really lived here at some point, etc., etc., etc. You know,
Mm-hmm.
they would testify to the historicity of their religion. But I don't find any that don't.
So,
In the
in the
view
sense,
that I adopted about that, go ahead.
yeah, in the sense that like I might be a fan of the lessons, like those kind of interpretations from the Bible. I mean, I could call myself a Christian in that sense. Um, but I wouldn't say that just because I get a lot from all the religions in that sense. But I don't take them literally, so I'm not like a pantheist or something like that either.
What if your intuition is correct?
Um, well, if my intuition is correct, it's still an atheistic universe. Like my intuition tells me there's nothing supernatural, but that these stories represent something that's transcendent but not magical.
Again, what if you're right?
Hmm, I guess
Do
I
you
guess
really
we'll
think?
die then. I don't know.
I mean, if you're right about this, could man have written these stories?
Yeah.
You think so?
Hmm.
Well, then you don't really think it's all that deep.
No, I think man is capable of a lot of deep literature and kind of philosophy like that. I think just even taking like mushrooms or some of the spiritual drugs like DMT, it unlocks a lot of psychological things that we're not usually capable of thinking of. Um, I don't know. People just gain a different perspective, and I see a lot of influence of drugs in ancient religions, even I guess even modern ones too. Um,
It's certainly true.
yeah, but even totally secular entertainment, I see as having a spiritual message and a spiritual core to it.
Right.
I think for me, just literature in general is a very like I would call myself spiritual despite being an atheist because I think I don't believe in a literal spirit, but
Right.
there's almost this feeling of being separate from this material world just because of how our consciousness works. But
Do you think that's what could be described as an emergent property of our consciousness that we get that sense about it, or do you think there could be
um,
some truth in that?
I would say it's an emergent property.
I think there's truth in it. I think that's actually what's going on. Um, and yes, confirmation bias has to be, and apophenia and pareidolia and all that has to be considered too. But I think statistically, the likelihood of there being, for instance, there being no scheduled phone call, but I think of a certain friend or loved one, and I go to call them, and they're already calling me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the if that's just statistical likelihood, and I'd like to see somebody work that out who's a mathematician, and I'm nobody's mathematician, but I'd like to see somebody work that out because I think the chances of that happening once in a lifetime would be pretty prevalent. But I think 5 times in a lifetime would be way too much. Now, that's just what I feel about it. I can't prove that mathematically. But it seems to me that these things happen to us on a pretty regular basis, and then we just dismiss them and we don't look at, the other possibilities that could explain that, aside from mathematical chance, aside
Yeah,
from scheduled things.
I think
I think
that's I get that. Oh, I'm getting an echo kind of. Um, is that me? Okay, sorry
I
about
don't
that.
I don't personally hear an echo on this, but when you speak,
Um,
I don't hear an echo.
okay, I think it's gone. Um, what was I saying? Sorry.
We were talking about
Um,
we were trying to talk about the
oh
statistical
yeah,
likelihood of these.
yeah. To me that's when I feel most like, oh, there could be something else out there. Like when you get these weird coincidences.
Mhm.
Um, and I used to actually think I was like a psychic person. Like when I was young, I was like, I would I would have these like, I don't know what to call them, visions or premonitions or dreams or something, and then it would happen. But as I would get a little older and start questioning it, it was like it was always very trivial things like just a little bit of a conversation. Or I remember one time,
Did you ever write them down before they happened?
no,
See, I
um,
have. I've written some
because
of them down before they happened and watched them
yeah,
happen, and gave them to the other person involved. Gave the writing to them.
yeah, I mean that would be interesting. But it always felt more like deja vu as I would think about it more, because I would
Hmm.
only it didn't occur to me at the time. Like I didn't feel like I had a vision and then of something that would happen in the future. It was just when it had happened, I'd feel like I remember this very, very clearly.
Hmm.
Um, I think the only time I might have thought about it beforehand, like that I actually remember, is it was just very trivial the way my blanket was folded on my bed and the way I unfolded it, and it was just weird the way that I got into bed, and it happened exactly as this thing that I had been thinking of. But it's
Why?
like if
Why
I
is it
actually,
important?
sorry,
Sorry, go ahead. I'll
uh,
let you. Go ahead. Thought you were done.
if it's if I actually had this ability, how come it never works for anything important and only for very trivial things that like the way a piece of fabric ruffled? I mean, it could be just a quirk of my memory where it's just triggering recognition, or it could just really just be matching a pattern that I've thought about so closely that it seems like I've done it before. Um, and I haven't written it down, but there have been times where I've been in a conversation. I'm like, this person's going to say something very specific. I know, I remember them saying it, and this is when it's going to happen, and they say it. But it's really not too specific, and it's like one sentence maybe, and it's kind of generic. So I don't know. Go ahead.
It sounds like you're unpracticed. Like you don't do it on purpose.
Yeah, I mean, if you can teach me,
Actually, you could teach yourself, and I think that's even better.
okay.
Like I already suggested, you start writing these things down.
Mm-hmm.
But just like you and I are having a conversation, I mean, I'm not going to tell you about my foot problem at the beginning of a conversation because that's a conversation for someone who's much better friends than we are now. In fact, if you think about it, in all relationship building, you start out with small general topics and you get more and more and more specific and more personal. So you're saying to me it always seems fairly irrelevant and minor. Would you accept something that was world shattering and changed your entire view? Would you accept that right now in that way?
It
I'm
would
thinking you probably
be
would buck against it.
it would be much more convincing. I think I would need more than one just
Yeah.
to kind of rule out coincidence,
Sure. Absolutely. That's reasonable.
or just something just so specific. Like if you knew something that I did when I knew that I was alone, I don't know. I'm
What
sure you
I've
could
found
guess
to
a
be
few
true
things.
is what's that?
No, I said I'm sure you can guess a few things.
Yeah, but that's cheating. I mean, that's just being human.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, you probably don't have a communal bathroom, for instance. Most people go to the bathroom by themselves.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I could guess certain things because of humanity, but that would hardly prove anything to anybody. And I think the whole point is to prove these things to the individual experiencing them. I think that's the whole point. I mean, I've had experiences of things and knowing things that I can't know. And I don't mean like horoscopes crap. I mean real stuff, specific stuff about other people, but that only happens when it's going to make for good testimony to the person.
Hmm.
Like
Like
it doesn't happen all the time. It doesn't happen every time I'd like it to happen. I don't have that kind of control over it. In fact, I
mhm.
think I have no control over it.
Yeah, that's one of the things. Like, well, I'm sure you're familiar with like out of body experience type things, where someone knows something that they shouldn't be able to know, and they claim, I floated above
Verification
my
of those things is
body and
pretty
I saw,
spotty, but yeah.
yeah. Um, I mean that it's a little bit gives me pause, but again, it's like the stories I've heard was they knew the amount of change that was on top of like some tall bookshelf or something
Hmm.
by floating above their body. Um, it's never like, well, I found this serial killer because I followed him with astral projection.
Don't say never.
Well, not that I'm
Before
aware.
you say never to that,
No,
go look into psychics that have helped police and police found things. Before you say never.
I actually have not looked into it much, but I used to watch some of those psychic shows.
Hmm.
I never put much stock into it. Just, I mean, again, as far as I've experienced, it's always been like rather trivial things. Even if they've contributed to a case,
Hmm.
it's it's usually just something that you could get lucky on. Not
Hmm.
that not that you should always get lucky on stuff, but it's something that you could, as far as I'm aware.
I mean, I'm a much bigger fan of James Randi than I am of any psychic on TV or anything like that. I agree with James Randi the majority of the time, actually.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, it's it's important, like, to meet his $1 million challenge. Like, it's important to
That's
be
been
able
dropped,
to.
by the way.
It
That's
has.
not offered anymore.
I think I heard that.
Yeah.
That uh, but a big part of that is being able to reproduce the results, kind of pretty much at will.
Well,
So
I've had certain things happen to me out of my control that are verifiable. I'll tell one of them. Hello, being mindful in the side chat. Thanks for showing up for us. Um, and actually, I've shared this story. I shared the story of what something going to block out those three stars. I shared that with being mindful some time ago, back before NASA found it. Being mindful could actually verify that. Um, Yeah, I went to visit my eldest brother when he was in the hospital for a rare form of pneumonia, and I didn't have a vehicle. I traveled by hitchhiking, and I didn't have a map to the town, and I couldn't remember the name of the hospital. Turns out there were two of them. I don't know where the truck driver dropped me off on the highway, what the exit number was. I didn't have a path to get to the hospital. But when he woke up in the morning and I was sitting beside him, he asked me how I got there. And I told him basically what I just told you. And he said, well, what did you see? And I described a certain gas station and a certain kind of housing development. He said, oh, you were by exit such and such. And I said, oh, okay. He said, well, that's 12 miles from here. And he said, when you walked, which way did you walk? And I described step by step each thing I saw, every street that I took. Now, he told me that and I can't verify this, is just what he told me. It's not my hometown. I still don't have a map. He told me that I took the shortest possible route over the course of 12 miles, and I walked it in just over 4 hours, which means I didn't do any wandering around. But I got kicked out of the Army for a lack of a sense of direction. I mean, I can verify that. I have an actual bad sense of direction. It's like a birth defect or something. So could I have done that under myself? I don't think so. I mean, I really wanted promoted. I really wanted to be able to do land navigation. It was money in my pocket if I could do it. I tried my best. I studied it a lot. I just couldn't translate from the map into reality.
Yeah, I mean, it's plausible. It's not impossible for you to have done it. But again, it's kind of like, if there is something helping, like, do you think something's helping you, or it's maybe just like a shifting of energies or something? Because
well, that's why I asked you all those questions about information and what reality is. That's why I asked you all those things. And the greatest part of it, I agreed with you.
Yeah. Just
that is, I couldn't have done it.
Just to finish the thought, like, so like, if it is something that's like genuinely on your side, either consciously or like spiritually, it just seems a little odd that, you know, it would manifest when you're just walking around, but not when you're trying for like a career, when it would actually be helpful.
That's pretty weird. I don't know. I can't explain all of it. I mean, I can only tell you what my experience has been.
I mean, didn't you say you were trying to have a career in land navigation?
I was in the Army at the time.
Okay.
And that was I was also an anti-theist, and by that I mean I was an aggressive, making a positive claim there could not be a God. Back when I was in the Army.
Okay.
Of course, you know, that's long about 30 years ago now. But
what was your
MOS
main argument back then, like, for that there couldn't be a God, and like how can you change your mind?
I tended toward 3 arguments actually. Historicity, that is, we have no physical proof. We only have correlation. We don't have any direct causation. We don't have any physical property of anything from any of these people. Josephus is a joke. People quote Josephus all the time. Josephus was altered, and I think most scholars will admit that. Even Christian evangelists will admit Josephus was altered. I tended toward making arguments from biology, based in evolutionary biology, based in evolution. I tended toward just speaking about a person's reason. I would appeal to their own reason and logic and talk about the unlikelihood of magic. So I think those were my 3 favorite arguments. I did also have a problem with the problem of evil. I had some problem with that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I would tend to agree with those points.
Sure. I did too until 2012.
Was that the comet prediction?
Well, that happened in the same year, but specifically when I say since 2012, I mean since I was shown this view of the text, which actually makes the text work internally and externally.
Okay. And it was it just came to you, or
What do you mean by came to me?
I mean, what, like no one taught you this, right?
Sure. Well, I blame an intelligence outside of myself because information was transferred.
Yeah, but not a human, like a
Not a person on this
yeah.
planet. No, definitely not.
Okay.
I've never heard of it. I've never heard of a preacher or a book or a video series or that has this view. I've never heard of it at all.
So is there anything someone could do to receive this kind of information?
What do you mean by receive the information? Like me sharing my experience about it, or for them to discover it on their own?
To have a similar experience as you had, to
Oh, that's
change.
real easy, actually.
Okay.
You make sure that you pooped. You make sure that you peed. You make sure that you ate. You make sure that you slept. You make sure that you did your chores, whatever's on your mind. You make sure you're not expecting any company. You make sure that you're physically secure, you're safe, you're in a safe, you're not sitting on the edge of a cliff or something stupid, right? And you sit down and you shut up. And as soon as you shut up, everything that's been on your mind all of your life is going to rush in front of you. And it's going to look like a mess. And the mess is so bad and it's so overwhelming most times that a person really feels at first glance looking at it that they're never going to get past that, and that's just going to be their meditative state. But that's not true. The truth is, if you stand there and kind of stare at it, so to speak, if you just look at that rush of thoughts that are very, very disorganized and disturbing and sometimes upsetting, that your brain will like go through them and they'll start to dwindle off and dwindle off and dwindle off, and eventually they become calmness. Now you'll see neo-Buddhist Americans, sorry, like in the park doing this thing. You'll see them do it all the time. But where they make the mistake and why their lives don't get better from their meditative state is they're looking for just peace. And they can get peace. But experiencing peace, although very settling and calming, grounding, and beautiful in its own right, doesn't answer any questions. The person comes out of that peace because now they got to go walk their dog, cook a meal, go to the bathroom, whatever their situation is, and the peace ends. And then the next day they're going to go to the park and do the same thing again because they really enjoyed the peace. But they don't get anywhere like that. So when that raging river calms down and becomes a nice smooth stream, there's going to be one more thing that pops up. And when that pops up, you have a choice. Like a reed popping up out of the water when the water calms down. You can look at it and go, nope, and push it back down. You can do that. And you're a neo-Buddhist American in the park. That's what you are. Or you can look at it and go, there's that thing. That's it, all right. That's the primary thing that's been bugging me for 10 years. And I freaking hate it. And I'm tired of looking at it. And I've never had an answer. And right now, in this moment, I'm willing to accept a suggestion. In my experience, immediately a suggestion comes. It'll be something I hadn't thought of. It'll be something I hadn't tried. Because if I had thought of it and I had tried it, it would have worked. But I never could solve that puzzle. So a suggestion comes. Then you test it against reality. You see if it actually works. If it works, you apply it. This makes your life better and better and better. And those little reeds that pop up in the calm of that stream will be smaller and smaller and smaller until you're down to stuff so insignificant you feel like, I'll just let that one go.
So how come that couldn't be like extrapolation?
Okay, let's say you were 51 years old, something was bugging you for 30 years. Don't you think I wanted to solve that problem? Don't you think I really tried? Don't you think I took other people's advice? Don't you think I asked my older brother, Don't you think I asked older men, women, anybody, children, desperation? I've asked 3-year-olds things trying to get wisdom about life.
Um, yeah, but so how can you confirm that it's something you could never think of? Because like, I mean, if you're trying for 30 years, I mean, the likelihood that something will work is, I mean, it's better than if you just give up at least.
I think that's a really reasonable question. I think the answer is I'm happy.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone who knows me knows that I'm content. I'm not pissed at anybody about anything, and my life is really pretty awesome. And I know very few people who can say that. So my proof is in repetitive application after testing and in an actual improvement of my life. That's my proof.
So how come that would need like a supernatural revelation? I guess if
I guess it wouldn't if you were a mega genius who knew everything. You could just do it on your own.
but
Personally,
so
that's not a
nothing
description of me.
so nothing you learned or none of your experiences like at all contributed to like trying out different things.
Oh, I'm not claiming that I didn't solve mechanical problems on my car. Sure, I did.
Yeah.
I did a lot of things on my own successfully. I mean, I survived without mom for quite a few years. I know some stuff. But was what I was doing working so well that I had great relationships with anyone who was willing to even try? Nope. Did people consider me to be a happy person? Definitely not. Was I well adjusted and able to handle stress? I once hid in a bush with a 9mm hoping to snipe a guy so I could date his girl.
So what like how come it couldn't happen in like a secular sense that
I'm
like
talking about.
how would you explain sudden inspirations? Like would they does it all have to come from a higher source?
No, I don't think all things come from a higher source. I think the best things come from a higher source. Go read quotes by Einstein, Tesla. Uh, um, I mean, there's plenty of quotes out there where people say something to the effect of, "This isn't mine. I just happen to have it."
Mm-hmm.
Now, either they were just extremely humble, or they were telling the truth. But that kind of humility didn't help them. In fact, that kind of humility, if that's what it was, hindered them.
I mean
I mean, I could be quoting Tesla or Phillips or just a whole bunch of folks.
I think like that where no one has a claim on like these inherent things or these big ideas. I think you can at least have ownership over the creative decisions that you extrapolate from things. Um, but just raw talent, you can't just work and get talent. I mean, you can improve it,
Sure, you can
but
develop a
if you
gift you
got it,
already
you
have.
got it. If you don't got it, you don't. It's
True story. Well,
um.
speaking of
So
that, I'll
how?
tell you who doesn't have this. I've looked into this and I can identify who definitely does not have this. Seriously. Anyone who's competing due to mental defect or injury, anyone who's competing in the Special Olympics, you can also notice how happy they are. And small children. Small children simply don't experience this. But then their brains aren't finished developing, so that kind of makes sense to me.
Experience what specifically?
Um, Intuitive accurate in, how do I say that? Accurate, accurate intuition without any prior experience. I guess that's how I'd have to say it.
I mean, I almost feel like, I mean, I definitely feel that I experienced that more as a child. I mean, I could be wrong
What age
today.
do you mean?
Gosh, I mean, like elementary school age.
Like what age do you mean? Do you mean like before you were 5? Because I'm talking about like
No,
5 and earlier.
yeah, probably not. I don't remember much before
But
5
like the
anyway at
limit,
all.
the youngest I've ever heard of was 5.
Yeah. I don't know, I mean, there are those cases of kids who know where bodies are buried and stuff like that. Um,
Sure.
I mean, I would like to know how that works, but I just, until it's been studied scientifically, I can't. I know it could be coincidence, and I can't really.
What do you mean
I
by
just don't like.
studied
I don't like
scientifically? What do you mean by that?
to understand some kind of mechanism. Like if they are receiving messages from some beyond, I couldn't ever really make that leap until that mechanism is at least some part of it is explained.
Well, let me tell you how atheists normally say it. I'll tell you how science normally says it. Now, this indicates a view about it, but they're already saying it. Did you know that if we map your brain, when we ask you to think about yourself, the same part of your brain will light up as if we ask you to think about God? Did you know that?
I did know that.
But that's one way they say it. And they say also that a human being can have a quote unquote subconscious thought for 3 to 5 seconds before they ever realize they're having a thought. Now,
Mm,
you can look at that two ways. The way I look at that is there's a part of me that is part of God. That's why it senses the same to me. And as for the other thing, processes starting before I recognize them, yeah, I've heard there are suggestions from God and Satan. Yeah, I've heard of that. And yeah, it takes me a minute to start processing them. Okay,
mm.
fine. I got no problem with it. But that's how they say the exact same thing I'm saying.
I've definitely felt like I could feel that process happening. Um, I don't know if it's just in my head because I know about it or what. I think there's other things where people have been shown to their brain will light up the correct letter before it'll show up on the computer screen or something like that.
Yeah, you're talking about the same test I'm talking about.
Yeah. Um, and to me, what makes sense is that just the way that our consciousness understands time or the present, in a sense, is the conscious way that we understand it is more narrow, but the unconscious can experience more of the present, if that makes any sense.
Well, experientially, it does make sense. But tell me, where is the unconscious located in the brain?
Well, it's an interaction that emerges, or it's a something that emerges from the interactions between all the senses and all the storage information in your brain.
So we've mapped that out electrically, and we've shown that that's what's going on. That's a guess. That's a
How do
huge
you
guess.
mean?
What I mean is, we don't see that electrically. What you just said, what
Like
science said. What?
experiencing different, I guess, I don't know how I would say it, different widths or different lengths of uh, present, so to speak.
No, I'm not talking about specifically our perception of time, although I know you were.
Mm.
What I'm saying is the consciousness or the idea of mind or the occurrence of subconscious bleeding over into the conscious. We actually see zero evidence to that. There is no evidence to that. It's an assumption. Now, I'm going to assert that because there is no evidence to it, we're testing the wrong thing. Or that's not what's going on.
So I'm trying to understand. So what you are you saying that the subconscious is not part of the brain?
That's what I'm saying, yes.
Okay.
I'm saying what we're labeling the subconscious, a religious person should label the spirit. That should be the same word.
Okay. Um. So there's some pretty trivials. Like, what would you label subconscious? Like, is our fears and anxieties subconscious?
Well, I don't know. Are those based on actual experience or are they just paranoia? I mean, because I'm afraid of a
Could be
bear
either.
and
But
I'm
let's
afraid of dogs
just
that bite,
yeah. I
but
mean,
that's
let's
not
just say it
unreasonable.
was like a phobia that you were born with or something. There's no experience associated with it necessarily.
Gosh, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know about that one. Um, I,
Because like, or just any kind of instinct, really, is that, I mean, couldn't it be explained by biology?
well, explained by biology. I don't know if it can or not. Do we have explanations for things, and we have explanations for almost everything we observe? Sure, we do. Of course, we do. We don't like puzzles that are unsolved. And our best explanation is usually the best explanation we have, and that's fine too. But there's certain things that we have to assume because they can't be tested. And when it gets into the realm of things we can't test, I don't trust the results of no test. I just
Hmm.
I don't see any reason why I should.
I mean, I was definitely speculating about the time stuff, but I think it's pretty. Like, I'm not a neurologist or anything,
Right.
but as far as I'm aware, it's pretty demonstrable that instinct can be found in the brain, and it is, is explainable by some genetic changes.
I'm not sure that instinct can be found in the brain. I'm not even certain of that really. It's just like saying if we inject you with certain drugs, you're going to have a certain emotion.
Hmm.
Are we
But that's
really sure that's
all.
what's going on?
I mean, that's chemical, isn't it?
That you can magnetically or chemically induce an emotional state? Are we sure that's what's going on in that test? I'm not so.
Well,
I'm just saying I'm not so sure.
yeah. I mean,
I
I
mean, what
couldn't
if the
tell you
test?
specifically what cell in the brain does that, but if you interrupt or change the way that the cells communicate, I mean, you're going to change the way that it emerges out of that.
Sure, of course. If
Um,
you chemically change the environment, yeah, I get that.
yeah, and they different drugs will just stimulate different responses from cells. So, I mean, when you take drugs, you certain processes turn off, certain processes turn on,
I believe that.
and I mean, I'm sure that they have imaging of that people's brains on drugs.
Sure.
Not necessarily, an egg frying in the pan like they use, your brain on drugs.
This reminds me of all the split brain experiments and people who have traumatic brain injury and one half of the brain is separated from the other. Special cases like you've heard of some of that.
Yeah, when they remove just half of their brain from their skull.
Hmm. Well,
Yeah.
I guess they found a way to chemically induce where without injuring the person, they return to normal later. But they can chemically stop the brain from communicating with the other half, each half with the other half.
Mm-hmm.
And the person's personality will split and they'll become two different people. And sometimes they become both a theist and an atheist. Sometimes.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't think I've heard of that, but that part sounds familiar, where people will have that split personality between atheist and theist.
Sure.
I'm trying to remember where I heard about that. Um, so what? Yeah, would are they? Do they have two spirits at that point?
Well, that's kind of like me saying, in my view, and people have different opinions about these things. Um, in my view, that's like me expecting your processor to work perfectly, um, but your keyboard is broken and your screen's broken. I mean, obviously, if your screen and keyboard are broken, it doesn't matter at all how well your processor's working. You can't get any information. You can't do any work on your computer. I mean, you can bash me in the brain and maybe I'll stop experiencing God. And that could be true, but that doesn't mean that God or my perception of God was something in my imagination. It just doesn't mean that. Uh, or you could surgically remove my ability to understand God, and that doesn't make God non existent. It means you broke my processor or whatever. That's all that would mean. So I don't see that people born with certain aspects, birth defects, traumatic brain injury as being any proof of anything, even if it's purposefully induced and retracted later so that a person returns to their normal self. I don't think that proves a darn thing about the existence or inexistence of God. I think you're just like cutting the coax cable. That's all you're doing.
So do you think there should be, um, a part of the brain that should have activity when you're communicating with your spirit, or?
Oh, we've documented that. A person's experience of self, person's experience of God, person asking, questions, big questions, not little questions, of course.
Um, I mean, the way I understand that study is just, people's conception of God is, I mean, all the time, people are just kind of putting their own morality and their own thoughts and projecting it onto what they say is God.
Well, that's entirely possible, and I'm sure some people do. In fact, I've seen religious people do that.
Like, I don't know of anyone who disagrees with their God about anything. Their God always happens to agree with whatever they believe.
Well, you just met one. You can never say that again.
All right. What's your beef with God?
I told you I was an anti-theist.
Yeah. Well,
I had
not
every
anymore,
beef
right?
with God. I had every possible beef with God.
Yeah. Um, but well, do you
And
still
no, I
have
didn't get smashed in the head. No woman left me. I didn't lose my job or nothing traumatic happened. Nothing at all, actually.
do you still have those disagreements though?
Do I still have those? No, I've come to accept that what I'm talking about is provably true. And I think that if a person's intellectually honest, they'll accept truth that has been proven to them.
So how would you tell the difference between someone just having this idea in their head and it being inspired by something beyond?
Well, I already gave you an example. I could give you a bunch of examples of it. How did I find that hospital?
Yeah.
I mean, that's just
Um,
one example. There's plenty of them. I literally did not know where it was at all, and I could have walked in any direction, and I could have made a mistake at any time and ended up not there.
mhm.
Or I could have wandered around for 48 hours or whatever. Or I could have waited till the cab started running and got a cab.
Yeah, I've had bizarre coincidences like that. Nothing too important though. Like there have been so many more circumstances where I could have used a coincidence like that.
Mhm.
And really the most convenient, most bizarre one I can think of is pretty much just like I got my shoes back for the day, or I think I left my phone. It's I don't know if it's that long of a story, but I was drunk, ended up I was staying out at a friend's place, ended up accidentally walking out of the place and locking myself out. Couldn't wake her up. Um, didn't have my phone or shoes, so I just walked home and went back the next day for my stuff and just ran into her like as soon as I got there. And she was, if I had missed her, she was going to be gone for a few days. And so, but I mean, overall, not that useful of a, of a coincidence. Because
No, I wouldn't call that one all that significant. I think most people
and
could reasonably explain that
I
away,
didn't
including you.
predict. Sorry, I didn't predict anything about it either. So
Right. Well, I would really recommend that you start eliminating your chances of being biased by taking notes about these things as soon as you have any idea about them and being as specific as possible. And don't wait for your memory to get bored with it and throw parts of it away.
I mean, nowadays my dreams are very bizarre. There's nothing realistic about them, unless
Well, maybe you're just goofing off.
unless
That's
I am uh, if I am having correct visions, then prepare for the zombie apocalypse. That's all I have to say.
well,
That's probably
it makes sense to me
half
that
my
that
dreams.
if I speak to you, I speak in English and not German. Not that I know German.
Hmm.
But if I spoke to you in German and you don't know German, I'm wasting my time.
Hmm.
So it's been my experience that people have shared intimate details about quote unquote silly dreams or stupid dreams or crazy dreams. And in fact, I've had people from just about every walk of life, as far as religiosity or lack thereof, tell me some of these things. And then I point them out to them in the prophecy. And it's not maybe that's what the dream was about. It's like the right stuff in the right order with the right colors, sizes, shapes, etc., etc. People who've never read the text. Now, to them, it looks crazy because they don't have a point of reference. Doesn't mean it is crazy.
Yeah, I mean, like I'm open to like if you can show that that has any statistical edge. Um, Same thing with prayer. Like if prayers to a specific God had some sort of statistical um, had a higher statistical chance to happen,
And what?
that to me would be evidence of that God. It wouldn't. I don't think it would be confirmation, but it would be pretty strong evidence,
Well,
in my
here's one
opinion.
of those weird things about being an American. What you just espoused there was a very Christian idea. I know you didn't mean to,
Mm.
and you weren't trying to say something by it, but I just like to point out to you that what you just said is that because people are in different societies, they're worshiping different gods.
Mm.
You see that?
Yeah, and I think I understand what you're saying, but I think
So that comes from a point of view of Christian pride. Not that other religious people don't have their pride as well. But if God is God, God's the ruler of the whole earth. And unless God is petty, he would have told everyone the truth, which is what Zeitgeist on Religion is pointing out, although their conclusions are crap. And they're taking advantage of Christian pride when they go, when atheists say things like, how do you know you have the right God? That's a play on emotion. They're taking advantage of the pride of the Christian who's going to say, Yahweh's the right one. Well, I got bad news for you. If Yahweh's the right one, Yahweh is Brahma.
well, so how would I mean, I guess if you're just worshiping multiple gods or just as one
There's
god out of a pantheon, I
No,
mean,
there's
you
just
would
different.
kind of interpret it as that's part of the true God or whatever.
Well, imagine Thor with a spatula making a pie, and he was all about peace and love, but he was the hero of a warring community. Would that make any sense?
I don't know. I guess
Like,
it
how
would.
could you be the hero of a warring people if you're a pie maker? That doesn't make sense. On the other hand, there's a Native American tribe that's extremely peace oriented, and their story of the hero, he comes and teaches them how to get along with each other.
Mm-hmm.
That's their idea of a hero. Now, does that make it two different beings? Not necessarily.
Just different
It's,
aspects.
it's just how they need the story.
Mm-hmm. But to me, that can be. I mean, that can be true without there actually being some sort of actual being there. There is that, it is what they need it to be.
Mm-hmm.
And but that doesn't necessarily need a god.
Nor does it make it true.
Mm-hmm.
It does not make it true that it's what the people need.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of getting into like the Jordan Petersonian truth
Yeah,
of whatever works kind of thing.
I'd love to have a conversation with that man. Maybe someday I will.
Yeah, he's got some things to say.
Because I'm not trained in psychology, but I could actually show him the end of the story that he started.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it's true. The same way that he knows that's true, but when it's a story about humanity,
That would be a good collaboration, I think.
I'd have a blast with it. I know that.
Yeah.
It's so funny. I was like commenting on one of his videos on religion, and as soon as I'd hit enter, he said the same thing I had.
Really.
He said it right after me. I'm trying to finish the sentences.
In the video, like as you were watching the video.
As I was watching the video, I was making comment on it as it went,
Mm-hmm.
and I was finishing it, the thought right before, and then I thought he wasn't going to finish the thought, and then I wrote it and hit enter, and then he finished the thought and said the same thing I said. Not that I'm not a genius like he is. I don't think that I am. I just know that this view of it works.
Mm-hmm. I think, yeah, it's very. I like his stuff because it puts spirituality in a psychological context, and it's accessible to me because even though it is in a mythological religious context too, but it's it can be understood as secular.
Well, I'll tell you something you're not going to see Jordan Peterson do. You're not going to see it. Even if he had 50 lifetimes, he still wouldn't do this. There are parts of the Bible he is not going to touch
Yeah.
because there is no truth of human nature in the story, and that's not what the story's about. And I think he's a prominent and possibly even eminent psychologist, whatever his degree is. I don't know. I think he's a genius. I really respect that man. But there's parts of it you can't even interpret that way.
Mm-hmm.
It won't go that far. It won't stretch that far. It's not what it's about.
Yeah, I don't even agree with him totally on all of that stuff, but I think it's very interesting. Um, yeah, I he would be probably one of the top people I would have a conversation with.
Yeah, I would too. Maybe someday. Who
Yeah,
knows?
I
I mean, I
wonder how
didn't
you get
expect.
him.
Sorry, go ahead.
I wonder how you get him as your therapist.
Lots of money,
Mm-hmm. He probably doesn't practice anymore, but
and then stand in line.
yeah,
I don't know if he practices or not. I really don't know.
yeah, that's
Well,
too many
Snake was right.
patients.
That is to say, Taylor, you are once again a pleasure to speak to.
Yeah,
Um,
thanks.
which means I'm going to go have a cigarette. That's what all that means.
Ah, alrighty. Are you coming back?
No, I'm going to call it a night. But I tell you what, and it's best to cut these things off a little bit
Mm-hmm.
before they get too tiring. I think, you know, keep it interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah, we'll
I
have
would consider
another one.
it a privilege again to talk to you anytime.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thanks for
So
having
next
me.
time you're bored and the girlfriend went out with the girls, send me a link, man. I'm there. Okay.
Yeah, man. Alrighty.
Okay.
Sounds
Thank you very
good.
much.
I will digest some of this and come back.
Okay. Cool.
I like the setup you got here.
It's if you really like it, it's StreamYard, and this edition of it is free.
Alrighty. Yeah.
It seems to be performing really well.
Yeah. All right, I'll check it out.
It's super user friendly. Like all the options that you might want are right there on the face of it. You just put the cursor on it and tap, and it works.
Yeah, I can't figure out the chat, but maybe
What
I need
about
to
it?
sign up or something like that. But all right.
You
Did you
you
want?
can't enter anything into chat? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I can see it. I just can't find where I'm supposed to type it in. Um, did you want to go over the chat or anything? There was one question that I thought was interesting.
Was there? I never saw any questions. I was paying attention to you. What was the
Yeah,
question?
it popped up on the screen. This one guy asked, so the emotions and thoughts in your head are not reality?
Well,
And
I know this one guy well enough to know that he was trying to set me up for a big win.
ah,
That I think that's why he said that. Um, he doesn't believe that, and he knows neither do I. Um, if I could expound on that a little bit,
yeah.
in Christianity, what a person would call a spirit, I think it never left heaven, and I think I have limited contact with it, and I think my contact with it is a pretty crappy connection, actually.
Hmm. Maybe we'll talk about that one next time.
Anything
My
you like?
my response, I guess, would just be, I mean, you can objectively verify certain things that are happening in someone's head.
Sure.
I think. I mean, we could talk more about that, but um, just from brain scans or just how someone's behaving, I guess.
Sure.
But it would be great if we could share our subjective experiences. I think that may be one of the next leaps for humanity, actually.
Could be pretty cool. Could be pretty freaky too. I don't know. I'm not
Yeah.
sure if I would. I'm not sure if I would. Maybe I'd sample that briefly and with no commitment and no strings attached, just once.
It would be quite a Pandora's box.
Well,
You
maybe
know,
next time we'll
good or
talk
bad,
about
who knows?
Pandora's box. That's an
Yeah.
interesting story.
Yeah. Well, all right, man. It's been fun.
All right. Thank you very much, sir, and have peace.
Yeah. See ya.
Respect to you.
Yeah. Bye.